extra damage to face if it's cleared 2 minions off the board at the end of it after a devolving missiles. So there's all this nice little niche utility that it can put together even in the matchups that it's not designed for. Whoa! Never mind!
Yeah,
welcome
Subtle.
to European Grandmasters, baby! We start as we mean to go on.
And just look, Bozzdton's face tells you everything you need to know. And with how ridiculous this is, and I know you are quite passionate about this discussion, Subtle, but 2 questions. 1, should Bozzdton keep this hand? 2, does Bozzdton wait, because he is off coin, till turn 4 to Lunacy, then turn 5 double incanters with this keep?
All right, here's the clauses. If you're going to keep this hand, yes, that's how you do it. You do not play any flows before you play Deck of Lunacy. However, I respect this decision enormously. This is like a hot take that I'm not 100% comfortable with, because I feel like people bring Control Warrior potentially with the idea of countering Mage. I have quite a limited sample size of playing Mage against Control Warrior, and it's not really a matchup that we've got to test a whole bunch, even in like our caster practice sessions or whatever. But within my small sample size, I am very successful with Mage against Control Warrior by just burning them down. And I think particularly when everything in your deck is so cheap and all your Spring Waters are still in your deck, right? So your opportunity to just go outright miracle turns with Spring Waters and Burn are still available. I really, really respect just sticking to the burn plan. And I think just based on my limited experience so far, this is what my instincts would tell me to do in the matchup as well.
And I'll back you up on it as well, because just under a week ago, I was actually playing Wyra's list, which is, I'm pretty sure, like 28, 29 cards, the same as Warma, has the Cthulhu, you know, and has all the main standout pieces in there. Yeah. And I did struggle versus Mage because of that reason, because you look at cards like Rancor, well, are you actually getting a good Rancor against Mage? Not really. And then you've got a kind of dead card in the hand. And just in general, the actual armor gain isn't that great when Mage's damage can be fairly consistent. Right. It's not like Demon Hunter, right? Or like Control Priest, where you're pretty confident that you can just armor up a lot and not really be messed with.
I mean, this seems like a pretty powerful start as far as I'm concerned. This Impex's Blast can go face, deal 6, cut off all the armor, play around Shield Slam, and then even the Brain Freeze can come down and do...
Why not? Take an extra card as well, Sol. Enjoy. Oh! You know what? I love that Bozzdton is just appreciating this, because I still think there would be players who would be quite, you know, sort of stoic about it, even though it's an insane draw. But Bozzdton's just like, this is ridiculous, and I'm here for it.
I know I've already beaten this dead horse so hard to the point where it just kind of sounds like I'm bullying the dev team at this point. But man, this seems so in line with the options available to other classes. It's just brutal. Look at this draw. Like, literally, if you'd have given him his deck and told him to put the cards in the right order, he would have come up with something very similar to this.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really asking me, like, Combustion would be a second Fireball? And that's a stretch? You know what I mean?
No, I think actually the first Fireball would have been just some other card that he's never going to play, right? Because actually what you want is for those first 2 cards that aren't discounted to just be garbage that you never play for the whole game. So it's the other way around, in my opinion. It's the Fireball costing full mana that's the bad choice. He gets a Mazaki. His whole deck costs 0, and he just has a Mazaki in his hand. Incredible scenes, Raven.
And now an Alar as well.
Why not? Yeah, sure.
Pretty difficult to deal with. And look how fast this is as well, because you look at this board and go, okay, you know, Heart of Cthulhu, swing, wait a minute, what happens with the Alar Ashes? And then you're like, oh no. And even this brawl isn't even a particularly good answer either.
Swing into the 0-3 and leave the 2-3 up. So that's actually the good outcome for Warma, but, you know.
It worked out as best as possible, but that still doesn't mean he's feeling comfortable by any means.
Right.
I'd be a huge fan of just dropping Mazaki here, honestly.
He does have a 3-mana Refreshing Spring Water in his hand, though, Raven. The potential for that to juice the Fireball to like 12, 13, 14 damage is pretty high right now.
It's true. I mean, I guess he could just play his 5-mana mask and just, I don't know, tip Bob or whatever people say with the with the 1 mana.
There's the dance of the Bulwark in this matchup, right? Where you generally don't want a mask in case you see Bulwark come down, and they don't really want a Bulwark until they see masks come down, and vice versa, right? It goes kind of round in circles. So kind of holding onto it.
And I guess like that was my sort of where I got to with Mazaki is that, well, what's the turn? Do you know what I mean? And I actually, looking at it, quite like Bozzzton's approach of actually, you know what, spend the mana on the expensive Fireball because there isn't actually much else to do.
Sure. And if you are going to play a Mazaki turn later, you'll just, you know, you're going to draw so many cards, ideally, that you'll get through to another burn spell to finish it off with anyway. Makes sense.
I mean, here, Bozzzton can actually just overuse his removal, I would say, because he just won't need it. There's obviously points of keeping some cards for Mazaki, but for example, can this 3-mana Combustion just be used this turn? Just get it out the hand, get it out the way?
Yeah, I like going 3-mana Combustion and the Ring Toss this turn. Since, you know, bizarrely, your Combustion actually corrupts your Ring Toss this turn. And then that preserves all the 0-mana spells and the Refreshing Spring Water for next turn, right? So you have maximum pop-off potential. Look to find that other Cram Session. Oh, he's actually going to go, though. Okay. Was not expecting this.
Yeah, he can use the Ring Toss to defend, and he can actually just devolve in Brain Freeze as well this turn. Because, of course, if he doesn't do anything, his Mazaki just dies right to the weapon in the trade.
Yeah. This does surprise me, though. I feel like his potential to just juice this super hard from a standing start, essentially, next turn. It's pretty strong with the Refreshing Spring Water coming online with the Mazaki.
And we can see Warma's going to have an answer to any combination of secrets, right? Because he can just bust the counterspell with Shield Slam and then just coerce this away.
Gives up the Corsair cache to the counterspell, which means his Bulwark is left fairly stranded in his deck now at this point. There is that War Cache.
Yeah, you can just War Cache it, it's fine.
Which we have seen that Warma has a little bit of a tendency for. And he hits one of the only possible minions in the game that he's not able to Shield Slam here without taking damage.
Ouch. But yeah, but it'll deal 5 to Bozzzton.
Yeah, sometimes that's an enormous low roll, right? When you when you're playing Mage, but in this scenario, absolutely not. That is the nuts.
I think
that's lethal. What was I talking about?
Yeah.
What was I talking about? Shooting star pushing damage. I'm a prophet, Raven.
It's
I saw
good.
this coming a mile away.
Well, I was going to say as well, even when it does just like deal a damage, right? When you've not even gave it spell damage or anything like that, as long as it just deals the damage, kills off a minion, it's going to help, and it really did there. But just a funny game #1, if I'm honest. Not very funny for Warma, of course, but in terms for Bozzzton, like that is just one of those like dream games and those dream opening hands, right? And again, I do think just the keeping his cool and not keeping Deck of Lunacy was a pretty good heads-up play there.
Yeah, I like it, honestly. Like, people might view that backwards. And again, like, I don't have 100% confidence in this statement. Like, you know, normally I will shout with maximum pomposity about how I'm right and everyone else is wrong. But I think some people might view the matchup of like, oh, Deck of Lunacy is probably a good card against Control Warrior, right? Because you get the ability to make all these extra threats and play Grand Slam and survive the fittest and just make huge boards and beat them up. But I actually think Control Warrior is better equipped at just clearing 6 or 7 boards over the course of the game than it is at trying to build to generate 1 million armor, right? Like, I think, but even old school players kind of have this tendency to think of Control Warrior as a deck that gets to like 90 total effective health with Justicar or Odd Warrior or whatever else it ends up being. This really isn't that deck anymore. They don't stack that much armor. So if you can kind of play around the couple of traps they have with Rancor and the Bulwark of Azzinoth, I think the ability to just burn them out with Mage is very much there, particularly when all your burn costs nothing because you just drew double blue card in the opening hand.
Even so, just looking at Warma's hand at that point in the game, right? It was 2 Cthulhu pieces that are removal. It was a Shield Slam, a Coerce. Like, those are all things you want to do on 1 to 2 minions. You know, now and again he used a brawl, but to stop actual damage, there's no shield block or anything like that to help out, so a bit of a rough opening there. But now Warma gets to pick his Token Druid into the Mage, which is a much better matchup, especially if Bozzzton won't be pesky and draw double Incanters flow for the opening hand.
Yeah, this is the kicker, though. It's a better matchup, but I don't think it's one of the best matchups. We've talked a lot about the dynamic of Mage and whether it's too easily counterable, perhaps, to be like a top-tier deck in Last Hero Standing. But I think some decks, you know, Face Hunter and Weapon Rogue, for example, have the ability to, like, okay, cool, you spent your first 4 mana of the game playing 2 Incanters flows. Well, you're at 12 now, so enjoy that, right. You know? Whereas Token Druid kind of takes that little bit of time to get going as well, so it's a little bit vulnerable to those Incanters flow starts still coming out from Mage. That X factor still exists. Obviously, it's still a favourable matchup for the Druid, and it's the correct counter queue in this position, but it's not a favourable I'm as confident in as just queuing like a straight-up hardcore face deck going up against Mage on the other side. So if there's another double blue card in the opening for Bozzzton, we might just see this one be a little bit closer than you might expect.
Can't see it yet, but this is pre-mulligan, of course. And I don't know, the Token Druid as a deck, and as a deck we've seen a lot, especially in other regions, really does just fascinate me, because it feels like, I don't know. Yes, there's obviously skill involved. I'm not saying it's completely skillless, but it feels like so much power.
Yes, you are. That's what you want to say, Raven. Come on.
It feels like there's so much power of the deck just based on hitting those 1 to 2 key cards. And of course, you can say that about Incanter's Flow, but Mage does plenty of other stuff without Flow, right? It's obviously not as powerful, but it still does it. Whereas without Glowfly or Gibberling, you're just not doing anything with Token Druid, right? So you are playing a bit more of a dicey game, I feel.
Yeah, I do think that's a valid criticism of the deck. It's kind of like, it has a very clear win rate split, I think, between, you know, the games where you have the good cards that you can build off, the board generators, the Gibberlings and the Glowfly Swarms, and the games where you're just stuck, stranded, you know, scraping together little boards here and there while you wait for those things, right? But that doesn't really change the fact that it still wins a good percentage of games, right? On average,
of course,
the amount of card draw that it has packed in there. So, you know, it's still a good bring in a lot of positions just because of, you know, decks just have a win rate. And this idea of consistency and inconsistency is very strange. But I do side with you just philosophically and just as a feel and as a player experience thing. Like, Token Druid is just not a deck that I really get down with.
Well, Warma's doing good work so far. Did manage to get one of those Gibberlings, and he is going to go pretty wide as well. So it's all on Bozzzton whether he has something to clean this off. Like, the Ruined Orb is an okay start, does have Brain Freeze, but unless the Ruined Orb gets something very powerful, that falls a little bit short for me.
It does. He can still go like Ruined Orb into Combustion, which would be pretty strong here, and if he misses, he gets to go Ruined Orb, Brain Freeze and Ping to still clear up 3 minions here. So I think you start Ruined Orb on just any of the 2/2 minions, leaving the 1/1 alone, because that still gives you maximum options for the future.
Like, the other weird option is if you're hoping that there's no buff, because unless there's some kind of Innovate or Bloom, then Arbor Up's still a turn away. There is just like a Pexis Blast and get a 5-drop on board, which it might not sound like the best plan, but if you have a 5-drop, you would expect it to trade at least 2 of the minions, and then next turn there's the Ruined Orb, there's the Brain Freeze and such.
That's fair. This is option number 3 as well, where you can just go Ruined Orb, Brain Freeze, and AI, and just take that over the Ping instead. The problem with that is that you... Oh, that's the dream. That's the good one. Love it, right? Shoot second from right. Yep.
Yep. Shoot the spell first minion. Even though Bozzzton could have removed more damage from the board, that's the fear factor one, right?
Yep. Love it. Yeah, so that was the good outcome, and I think, you know, regardless of whether he intended to go with Arcane Intellect that turn, I think that was a good catch from Bozzzton in terms of sequencing, because every fibre of your being as a Hearthstone player has this drummed into you, right? Draw first. That's just the rule. That's what you do in that situation. But even if Bozzzton was going to play that turn as Ruined Orb, Brain Freeze, Arcane Intellect, and forego the Ping, I still think Ruined Orb first was the best thing to do because of exactly that out that you saw there.
And I actually quite like this Thorngrove Sentry because you have to assume that Bozzdton struggled to do that, right? Because you saw it, the Runed Orb into combustion, right?
That is
yeah, but you know what I mean. As Warma, you'd be like, okay, he struggled. So just make an okay board again, and then still have Arbor up. The only thing I think he's dealing with here is if the board gets cleaned up, he's one less spell in hand for the Glowfly refill. I do think it's worth the risk here.
Agreed. And this is the turn where you really want to build into your Soul of the Forest, because you know one flow's been played, right? So you know Flame Strike costs 6. So you know if you're generating a board next turn and not just landing the Soul of the Forest straight up next turn, that might already be too late, right? Because Bozzdton can just straight up Flame Strike away your whole board, and you're never going to get to land that Soul of the Forest.
And Warma's got that nice position of choice, right? Based on what Bozzdton does this turn, he can like Arbor up for lethal if like nothing's cleared whatsoever. Or he can say, okay, you cleared like 3 minions, do I actually just Soul?
Yeah, worth noting that he does have that Moon-touched armlet amulets built up, so if he goes with the Arbor up, like there could be a position where Soul of the Forest looks like the best play, right, because it plays around Flame Strike, but you can put them in a position where if you go Arbor up and they Flame Strike, you just kill them on the following turn anyway, so Warma will be on the lookout for those spots as well.
Okay, so yeah, it looks like he's going to go Soul. Okay. Let's look at whether you just... There's always the thought as well of, okay, it's going to turn 6 against Mage, which would be the Flame Strike turn, but the second they don't have it, you know what I mean? Like, it's just... You've just potentially missed a chunk of damage, but this does front load.
That is the draw, Raven. Shooting Star second from the left, trade on the right, and he can still go full clear with the Flame Strike here. He's going to go fishing, though, with the spell damage instead. Try and get in some outs here. It looked like such a clean turn with the Flame Strike. I'm very surprised that he's, you know, going in, looking for different answers.
Well, he got kind of an answer in the Brain Freeze. I think at this point he wanted to generate like Varden somehow.
He just wouldn't have had the mana to play it, right? Even if he'd have generated it.
I mean, if you've got like a Font of Power, right, and just like straight away. I focus on clearing those treants off. Of course, like killing a 1/1 Death Rattle to then make a 2/2 is not normally the best plan. So there's Arbor up, and he could Bloom Moon-touched.
Yeah, still short.
Yeah.
I wonder.
This is such a weird game because it keeps being not quite enough, but the more defensive Warma plays, that being enough is further away, right? So I actually do like the Arbor up here and just kind of push some damage instead of trying to, you know, build another board and go slower again, because I think that's what Bozzdton kind of wants him to do.
Yeah, at this point, this is very much cross your fingers, no Flame Strike, though. But honestly, I don't even think that's a bad read, like, based on the play last turn, right? Like, I feel almost like if I was Warma, my read would be, okay, he probably doesn't have Flame Strike, because Flame Strike was sick on that last turn. Although I guess, from Warma's perspective, it does involve the Shooting Star, but he did see the 0-mana Shooting Star, so you can kind of add in that deduction as well, but... Yeah, regardless here, the Flame Strike is going to be savage on this turn, if even needed, because now Bozzdton has so many extra tools with the Combustion, Devolving Missiles, and everything else.
It's weird again, though, right? Because Flame Strike will clear the board, like, no matter what. It's going to start with Devolving.
Nuts. Well, now just Combustion and Pings clear the board, right? So he does again just to get to preserve his Flame Strike.
Runs out on me.
Does he need the 2 damage ping here?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Because even after this, right, he still just has 2 minion attacks to go through.
Bozzzton was born to win GM this week, so that's what I'm reading based off these games.
Bozzzton, mate, get yourself out and buy a lottery ticket today.
Yeah.
This is, oh my goodness, this series. He knows. He's got that face of a Hearthstone player that's just embarrassed to be winning this badly because, sure, like, you know, he's playing fine. I don't think he's making catastrophic mistakes or anything, but it's just one of those days where, like, you know as a player how much you complain when your opponents do this to you. So when you do it, it just feels embarrassing. So you're just like, oh yeah, this is the thing I complain about all the time, isn't it?
I think I just like the fact that he seems to be trying to cover his mouth to stop himself from laughing on camera. It's like, no, Bozzzton, just laugh. Obviously, no one's laughing at Warma, you know, your opponent, but the situation in itself is just funny. And this is pretty much Warma's last hope here, and I think he has to go for Soul of the Forest, right? Like, what is the possible draw that makes it worth not playing Soul next this turn?
Who knows, right? Like random outs with nature studies and resizing pouch and all that kind of stuff, just having all the different blooms and stuff to get you to different points of mana manipulation. We saw the power of like Alex Straza, for example, from Eddie in a lost game, which could potentially come down here and you need something to scam with, but more importantly, how much is this on the other side? 8, 12, 14, 15, 17 plus 12 plus 2 spell damage. Yeah, that's lethal. I think that's just lethal. 12, 14, 15, 17 plus 12 is 29 plus 2 spell damage is 31. Yep.
It's plus... Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah,
plus 1 spell damage.
Yeah, twice. Yeah, sorry. I was like, no, Sol! Solarian's not plus 2 spell damage! But no, that is just going to be the game, and Warma's just a bit of a raise the hand. It's just like, right, another one. So game number 2 seemed to be close to as rough as game number 1 from there. And honestly, the thing that stuck out for me the most from that game, as Bozzzton just lets us all know he only needs to win one more game to win the series. Thank you, Bozzzton. Is that like Bozton's approach
let me write that down.
Yep, make notes, everyone. Bozton's approach to like half clearing boards when full or pretty much full board clears were available, and it's just something I've not seen too often against Druid, because normally you're like, oh my, they've got a board, can I clear it? Yes. Okay, get it gone quick, because they'll buff it. Whereas Bozzzton took, what, I think 2 turns of like more or less half board clears.
Yeah, I think the second one I was very on board with. The first one, like the Flame Strike, just looked so juicy because you were still preserving a minion anyway. I think he opened himself up to get punished by like a Solar Bloom kind of hand on the other side, where it's like Solar Bloom buff or something that then came down and just hit him for a million. Obviously that's a niche scenario, but I think he was in pretty comfortable control of the game. But it almost didn't matter, and I'm sure his line, of course, preserving the Flame Strike, played around a different hand that had more board generation time after time in it, right? Where the boards could keep coming down, and he preserved that Flame Strike to be able to deal with the next wave that came down, and then continued to preserve the Flame Strike to deal with a potential next wave coming down. So it's not to say his line didn't have merits, it's just I was seeing the game another way. But again, just to, like, this point is disingenuous and contrarian for the sake of it, but it does go back a little bit to the point I made at the start, right? Where I do think Token Druid is a deck that can lose to Mage if they hit the good stuff. Whereas I think, other decks that you can play as your potential Mage counter queue have stronger matchups if they're being played and mulliganed and so on optimally. So even though it looked like there is 0 agency in what happened to Warma there from his side, I would argue there is a tiny percentage of agency just based on the lineup and the decks that he's chosen to bring to the tournament this time around.
And now if I was Warma, I would be, well, I'd be afraid after those first 2 games just anyway, but that means he has Warlock left, and it's another deck that is pretty susceptible to just the raw burn plan. So again, I imagine that we're not going to see a plan to go for the Deck of Lunacy here from Bozzzton, as just raw damage often gets the job done from this Warlock.
No, it can't be done. Nalgadon told me so. You can't kill Warlock with damage. Yeah.
Now I'm not making the notes.
No, I completely agree with you. I think burning Warlock down is fairly straightforward. Perhaps if you were kind of on the train now with Malagos, we can talk about that.
Sure.
Because the healing is so much more consistent coming out from the fragments. I think, you know, it's very hard to kind of get your head around how much extra healing that is, because not only, let's say that you do draw just 4 soul fragments from the Malagos, right, and you heal for 8, which is the same amount as the Alexstrasza would do. Each one of those soul fragments that you draw also then redraws another card, plus the rest of the spells that you draw to fill up your hand, right? So that's more soul shards, that's more drain souls, that's more siphon souls, right? That you end up or just having in your hand to add to the healing on top of that as well. So over the course of a whole game, yeah, it's just more. Over the course of a whole game, I think the Mali adds a lot more healing. But, you know, based on conventional builds as it still stands, I think the ability to burn out is still very much intact for the mage.
Well, let's dive straight in, and in typical European mage Hearthstone fashion, we have an Incanter's Flow in the opening hand for Bozzzton, and he does have that Apexis Blast. Obviously, that means that one of his Apexis Blasts is not going to cost 4 mana after this flow, which is a shame. But yeah, it's still not looking too shabby at all for this start for Bozzzton.
He floated a Mana Raven. He didn't believe. So upset.
I think he has to believe. I think his deck just believes more than anything based on the games we've seen.
His deck certainly does believe. There's double Ogremancer on the other side, which is certainly something to look forward to. But I think Bozzzton was looking at this hand as a coin Apexis Blast kind of deal as well, which I do think is important in the matchup, especially when there's double Ogremancer, because your ability to go coin Apexis Blast puts you in a spot where you front load a minion against the Ogremancer turn, right, which is important. It's much harder to deal with an Ogremancer from an empty board than it is from actually have a minion down landed first. So I think that curve does generally makes sense, just holding on, passing turn 1, flow on 2, and then hold the coin for the Apexis Blast.
And with these choices here, you know, you've got to give a quick nod to Deck of Lunacy, but I think Netherwind Portal versus Warlock is so strong because all their spells are normally removal, so they're like cascading you, and then you get a minion, right? So I think it's nice and defensive there. Proves a bit of a problem for Warma, but it's just when Bozzzton is going to squeeze that in. It's going to be my question.
Preload Moarg is very interesting. I think Warma keeping tabs on the same thing here, right? What coin Apexis Blast means on the other side, and this means that the Apexis Blast would have to target the Moarg, or he would have an incredibly easy play to respond to it with the Drain Soul on the other side, or the Soul Shear, but you know, Drain Soul would end up doing essentially all of the damage that has been done by the Apexis Blast on the other side.
But like you said, I think the goal of the Apexis Blast really is the minion at this point in the game, right? As opposed to just raw burn damage to the face. Of course, you want all the damage you can get to the face, but yeah, I do think it's important. When you know your opponent runs double Ogremancer, you just want to get something down. So he's going to bail, though.
Yeah, diversion here, because now he can... Now the game's changed, right? Now, if Warma wants to play an Ogremancer, well, he's playing an Ogremancer into a board that just has a Moarg on it still, right? Which Bozzzton can just leverage from the other side. That gives him 8 damage combustion if he really wants it. 10 damage combustion even, because he has spell damage to manipulate as well.
Looks good to me.
Yep. So weirdly, those 2 turns back and forth of I think both players really planning around the Apexis Blast on curve. The battle, even though each turn made sense in isolation and the turn it came down, the way it's just panned out back and forth, I think, has ended up in a pretty favourable spot for Bozzzton.
Trying to work out whether devolving ever improves this scenario or not.
I think you just combust it, right?
What to do?
Fairly sure.
I think so. It's purely because the Moarg stays up, doesn't it? If you
yeah, because the taunt spawns in the middle.
Right. So I'm just trying to get my head around the idea of devolving, spawning a taunt that you can then potentially combustion still with that spell damage. Or whether it's worth to just do it straight up and let the Moarg sit there. It's probably just combustion, but you know what I mean? It's...
Now you spell it out. Yeah, now you spell it out, I can kind of see the argument, yeah. This is something that I was not really considering.
Just get him.
Dropping the Apexis Blast. Good outcome. Denies the Moarg. It's interesting, the combustion line, right? So you combust, the 3/7 dies, and the 2/2 that spawns next to it also dies immediately, right? So even in that world, if you want to deal with the Moarg, you can just trade your mini-mage and ping with your remaining mana to kill the Moarg if you think that's actually important. This line obviously protects your mini-mage as well while dealing with the Moarg, which has upside. But you've just pointed an Apexis Blast not at face when you had other options to remove the minions, which is kind of a red flag to me.
There's even the added bonus where Bozzzton doing the combustion play, he could have ended on devolving, right? So then it just leaves the Moarg as a 1/1 on the board. Obviously, he wouldn't have a 5/6, but as you said, he would have an Apexis Blast in hand.
No, hang on. I'm thinking about this wrong, aren't I? Because the Moarg and the overkill damage thing doesn't work how you want it to. So the splash damage probably would not go onto the taunt next to it, right? Because it's like how Moarg and piercing shot doesn't work, for example. So like the Moarg, the overkill part of the combustion, I think might not factor in the Moarg damage, which maybe changes the way the turn pans out. I'm not actually 100% sure how that interaction works. Obviously, the combustion damage itself would be doubled. It's just whether or not.
Yeah, it's whether like 1 or 2 or 0
on the left
goes
and the
across.
right goes. Yeah.
Now the window is open for Bozzzton to just chuck an Apexis Blast face, but he is starting to hit some of those scary turns against Warlock. Once Warlock hits like turn 7, 8, 9, they start to do like the really powerful things the deck can do.
Right. Double Drain Soul and Siphon in hand as well. Means that there is pretty much maximum potential for healing here for Warma.
I'm even looking at potentially like Netherwind Portal into Ring Toss. And just make Warma deal with 3 different secrets. Seems pretty good.
Wow, Luminary is pretty powerful here, though. The ability to play a couple of big minions, get some extra value out of the Keyword and Ivory. Oh,
best card in the game.
Why would you not want 2 Alexstraszas, Bozzzton? Think about it.
Oh, come on. Strict misplay.
Why do we love resizing pouch so much? How is this
I think
happened?
it was good once, and you know what? That's all it takes sometimes.
Yeah.
Just a quick check. Only 2 soul fragments in the deck, I believe, from Warma. So this militia is not really the best turn 7 on curve one I've ever seen.
Right.
So many.
But maybe Ogremancer Drain Soul? Probably it's not enough, is it? So if you Drain Soul the Luminary, then there's just enough damage to just kill the Ogremancer on board, which is upsetting. Unless Warma just takes a step back and goes for Cascading into Drain Soul, which would clear the board. Well, Drain Soul into Cascading, obviously. If you're doing it that way around. I think he's trying to just work out what to do with the rest of his mana. He could just Lucky Soul and Drain Soul as well. That has the benefit of actually just beefing up this militia.
Yeah, I like the Cascading line though. It seems with the hand that he has, he just should just resist damage as much as possible. That seems like his primary win condition to me, right? Sometimes as Warlock, you do just have to keep playing threats because you're never going to survive the damage, right? So you have to stick things and play around Mask and try and counter pressure and all that good stuff. Warma has a hand with a lot of healing stacked up in it, so I think he does have good potential to just reduce damage wherever possible and just try and outlast for as long as he possibly can.
And Bozzzton needs to get some of these cards spent. His hand's looking quite full right now, so he needs to get rid of some of this. It's just... Even like, the combustion clears the board, but how much does he even care about this board right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. He could just start Ring Toss just to get cards out of his hand, and then...
I think I do want to see secrets here.
Go Spring Water from there. He needs to do something, I can tell you that much.
He does need to complete his turn, yes.
Yeah.
Bit ring toss, maybe like Mirror Entity Netherwind Portal would be okay. He picked Oasis Ally and Mirror Entity, so close enough.
Yep, and that is the perfect draw from Warma to be able to defuse that situation. With the Spirit Jailer for the Mirror Entity. Can be a little tricky spot for Warlock to play around, because even giving a Spider Tank to your opponent just does not seem ideal, right? It's a lot of damage being represented in the grand scheme of things.
My question is, if he plays the Jailer and then Militia, does he trade a 3/3 into the Bozzzton's Jailer? Now that's the question.
Yeah, so currently 2 fragments in the deck. If he plays Jailer, there would be 4. So he would then have to trade 3 minions, right? 1 into the 1/3 and 2 into the 3/6. One of those would be a value trade, so he'd be left with 5/5/3/3/3/2 at the end of the turn, which doesn't seem all that powerful, right?
And 1/3.
True, true, you are right. Mirror Entity does not, in fact, just give the minions.
Jeez, that would be insane. He's going to trade because also as well, you don't want to like not trade and then Flame Strike comes down, right? And you're like, oh, even though it's just a 1/3, you don't want to pass over that, right? You want some instant value from your minions.
These 4 brain freezes that Bozzzton has might be able to start putting in some work.
Now, if these were resizing pouches, I think Bozzzton could go toe-to-toe with Priest.
Like, I know we meme about it, but I genuinely wish they were resizing pouch. Like, the ability for so much, like, extra burn damage at the end of the game is kind of ridiculous. Oh, no. Speaking of ridiculous, Raven, this game just took a turn for the weird.
Yes. I am with you as well, because it might not come into effect, but if, like, Warma did Ticketus, like, on curve or something, well, those resizing pouches could just completely make up for that, right? Very interesting, but who cares if he's just going to get some extra primes in the deck afterwards? Why not?
I get it, though. Like, Brain Freeze is one of the most efficient cards that you have. Again, it's like I was talking about Shooting Star right at the start of the series and how that ended up being a prophecy of just how they do low-key push damage because they clear boards very efficiently and then Mask gets to go face. Obviously, Brain Freeze is just right up there in terms of dealing with that, as well as if counter pressure starts coming down, right? Like, if Ticketus gets jammed on board just as a tempo minion, if Jiraxxus comes down and starts generating 8/8s, all that stuff, right? Like, Brain Freeze can just be buy a turn by isolating your big minion and just be able to push face. So they do have a lot of utility in the matchup, even though they kind of get pegged as anti-aggro cards a lot of the time. I think, you know, it's surprisingly effective in a matchup like this. Tamsin, I'm sure Warma has been hoping for that for as long as he possibly can before dropping this second Drain Soul, second Drain Soul and the Siphon Soul, which can both now be stacked up with that Tamsin.
It's the big question though, isn't it? It's made the decision harder now because he probably wanted to just siphon the Rustwicks, but now with Tamsin in hand, he could do all of that next turn and gain the double effects.
Yeah, so what is that, 12 healing total? He doesn't need 12 healing total right now, but he might do at some point over the game. So yeah, I don't mind this, right? Just divert, cash in the Tamsin right now, get a little bit of extra board presence.
Lightly used armor.
Do you like second Drain Soul and then just trade the 1/3 into the 1/1 here?
I would say no, personally. Like, I'm not sure how much this extra 1/3 is adding. Feels like this is a board that's going to get picked apart by, you know, spell damage, Shooting Star, Flame Strike, that kind of thing anyway. So the extra minion doesn't really do a lot for me. But it is just straight up raw extra stats on board for Mask to have to chew through and all that stuff. So there's definitely upside to it.
Beauty discovery.
Up the discount on the Aegwin with the Luminary. Beefs up that spell damage Shooting Star that I was talking about. I think ideally he will want to cash out some of this damage to face though while he has this +2 spell damage.
Yeah, it's getting a bit tricky, isn't it? Because although Bozzzton's got more than enough to to win this game. It's just not quite coming together, and now because Warma's put together a reasonably threatening board, Bozz has to spend a turn cleaning this up, and if he does, well, okay, there goes some more of his damage. He's just ruined off a minion, which is a bit of a problem. Doesn't get burn offered to him as the Discover, which again, now suddenly we're looking at just a Fireball in hand.
Grand Finale's nuts. He played an elemental this turn, right? Luminary is actually an elemental, so he just has freaking 6 mana 8/8 currently. Especially if or 6 mana for 2 8/8s, yeah. Luminary lives, or even if he has to pay 8 for it, it's just a massive refill on the following turn. So I kind of like it.
I think Bozzzton really needs some of these minions to start sticking though to push some extra damage. Warma now on 32. Okay, less now with Backfire, but still.
You can see he's like slowly eroding the value even from Warma's hand, right? To the point where Warma is going to have to start life tapping to keep up on resources. And lest we forget, even though this spell damage +2 was not really cashed out for a lot of face damage here, there's 3 more minions in the deck now that also have spell damage +2 every time they get drawn.
Okay, 4/5, reasonable. It's obviously not quite the power level of Aegwin, but still, it's close.
It's stuck. It's just 6 mana 2 8/8s, Raven. Best card I've ever seen in my life.
What about 6 mana 4/4s with Rush?
And spell damage +2. Wait! Oh my god, it works, right? They all have spell damage +2?
But it's a copy, right?
It's summoned 3 copies of this minion.
No, it has to, right? Because the beast buffs work on it.
Yeah.
I wonder.
So he has spell damage
lethal
+8.
next turn. It has to.
Well, the Luminary could die, right? And then he wouldn't be able to play it. But I think it's got to be worth the greed. It's spell damage +8.
But now,
the Death Rattle's going to go off 4 times because it's a Death Rattle enchantment on each of the minions that then goes into his deck and gives the minions spell damage +2.
I'm getting blizzard on the phone.
Yeah.
Who decided Bozzzton's winning this game?
Strictly illegal. This cascading only juiced 2, right? Yeah, it was only down to... Oh!
It's okay. He plays it anyway.
It's not, Raven.
No, I mean because he can stack the thingy.
He's dead.
Is he just dead anyway? Oh yeah, it's 6. I forgot. This is a way less fun way to finish this game. Oh my. This series was one for the record books, I guess, Sol, because even Bozzzton's just like, I'm sorry everyone. This was ridiculous, but I won. That was insane. I was getting so excited to see the quad spell damage shuffle. It would have been awesome. And Bozzzton, you've disappointed me. I'm just putting it out there right now. You should have just passed and carried on.
Honestly, that is strictly illegal. Not getting to see the Zigzor Prime interaction after all of that nonsense. Like, come on. Clearly, if anything was demonstrated that series, it's that the gods would make sure Bozzzton won that series no matter what he did. So even if he just threw and missed lethal on purpose, just so he could see the sweet interaction, he definitely still would have ended up winning. But yeah, in the end, it was a much more back and forth encounter that I was expecting. Honestly, like poked a little bit of fun at Nalgadan saying that he thought that building boards and tempo and so on was the way that you beat Warlock, and that burn damage doesn't really get there. In his defense, that's kind of what happened, right? And Nalgadan actually has one of the best mage win rates in the world right now at a top level in Grandmasters, so he certainly knows what he's talking about.